Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. This is Dan Turchin, host of AI and the Future of Work, advisor at Insight Finder, the system of intelligence for IT operations, and executive chairman of PeopleRain, the AI-first platform for IT and HR employee service. Now, we're pretty good at navel gazing here in Silicon Valley. I find that we convince ourselves that we have a monopoly on talent and innovation, and that somehow the rest of the world is chasing us. Well, not only is that what I'd consider a dangerous fallacy, but it's also just not true. It is very possible for companies to thrive elsewhere with less capital and even less competition. I first met Victory Farms through Endeavor, the largest network of funding and mentorship for high-impact entrepreneurs. We have a special episode coming up in a few weeks with the founder of Endeavor. But for today, we get to spend time with Joe Rehmann, CEO and founder of one of the largest sustainable fisheries in East Africa. Joe was born in Egypt and has lived on 5 continents. He launched Victory Farms in Kenya in 2015, and it is, to me, a shining example of what great entrepreneurs do when they ignore all of the reasons why what they want to achieve can't happen. Joe's solving the world's protein problem with a combination of people and technology. His story inspired me, and it reminded me to really think bigger. What Joe and his small team are doing is more ambitious and more impactful than almost anything I've seen in Silicon Valley. Breeding and selling tilapia in Nairobi may not seem like it will change the world, but just wait until you hear his story. I'm proud to have met Joe, and I love knowing that my kids are growing up in a world where we'll not only defeat COVID, but also the global pandemic that is hunger. Please, I encourage you, follow Victory Farms on social media, consider supporting sustainable aquaculture. And without further ado, it really is my pleasure to welcome Joe Rehmann to the podcast. Joe, why don't you get started by telling us a little bit about your background and how you got into this space?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Dan, for having me on. Yeah, background-wise, it's an even split. I spent half my life growing up abroad, not just Egypt, but a handful of other countries, and then and also a number of years growing up on a little hobby farm in Wisconsin. Yeah, as on my journey toward fish, I spent 5 years in investment banking coming out of school, and really felt a strong calling or pull toward Africa, where I'd spent some time already, but not a lot. And so I got very lucky coming out of B school to work for a mentor on a fish deal in Ghana. And 3-month due diligence assignment turned into 3 years of ops leadership at that company. And then after 3 years of that, I thought this shouldn't just be a one-man show. There's an enormous opportunity in white protein, but really in tilapia as the possibly the most efficient converter in the world of plant protein into animal protein. There's really an opportunity to feed the entire continent, and we need to build a platform that can access different expertise, talent, whatnot, to tackle this problem and basically make tilapia at the center of every plate.
Describe the protein problem, maybe not just in Nairobi, East Africa, but globally. Why is it so hard to produce protein sustainably?
Well, human production of animals, or humans eating animals, accounts for something like 10, 15, 20% of global CO2, depending on whose estimates you read. It's one of the major pillars. Pretty much all animal consumption is an unsustainable activity in almost any setting of scale, and global food is a scale business. So the protein problem in Africa is in some ways fascinating, in some ways deeply tragic. But in areas like we are in, and frankly, most parts of Africa, we're looking at 10, maybe 20% of the animal protein that WHO would recommend that folks eat. So you're looking at chronic malnourishment, all sorts of implications on brain development, long-term health, defense. It's a population that's also, the next billion people, most of them will come from here. We're at more than 1 billion today, growing to 2 billion. And if this population wants to eat a healthy portion of protein, which we should all want that, then we should be very focused on making that portion sustainable.
So Victory Farms is a business. It's not a philanthropy. And is actually, I should say, growing quite quickly. Talk to us about some of the challenges of the Victory Farms approach to sustainable tilapia production versus, say, I know you've described to me some of the market dynamics versus like a competing product from China.
Yeah, there's a few dimensions there on sustainability, but also health and food safety, and also just around globalization versus maybe what we might think of as regionalization of certain industries. On the food safety element, from an independent source published in the local papers, we had a 420 times the allowable level of lead in Chinese imported fish. There's really no way to characterize that other than seriously concerning for health and morality. That's basically fish being produced on the back end of a paint factory. So there's undoubtedly some scruple elements that we should care about. There's also a sustainability element, which is we're operating with a fish that's from Lake Victoria, Oreochromis niloticus. It's the only Latin I'll say today. But the niloticus part means it's from the Nile. Lake Victoria is the source of the Nile. We're able to grow our fish without any growth hormones to accelerate growth. We don't have chemicals or antibiotics or post-treatment. And those are all standard features of a Chinese exported fish. And so there's a significant sustainability piece there. I mean, a lot of people are familiar with getting antibiotics out of animal feed. Part of it is growing animals where they're after a million years of evolution, they're geographically acclimatized and they have natural resistances to the diseases that occur here. So we don't have to pump them full of chemicals and antibiotics. So there's a sustainability piece, and then the last piece is this global supply chain. China produces something like half of the global tilapia. Is that the future of food? Is it going to be a couple mega producers and then the rest of the world is dependent on them? It's possible. I think we're seeing strong signs that we're going to have fragmentation in a regional context, if not probably not national. But I think we're going to see more and more food returning to a regional context as some of the advantages of mega scale start to erode against the advantages of localization.
Joe, when we were first getting to know each other, one of the things that fascinated me and reminded me how blissfully ignorant I am about supply chains around the world is when you started talking about how you get your product to market and who your customer is. Talk us through from Lake Victoria to plate. What does that process look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a quick one. So you're looking at it. I mean, to place the context, we're looking at it at something like 40% on average spoilage of products in Africa from farm to customer. If you do rapidly perishable FMCG like fish, it's much higher. So we entered the playing field with expectations. Frankly, our expectations were very high, but the industry expectations were extremely low. We're moving fish through Kenya through a cold chain now with less than 1% spoilage. And of our locations, we've got 40 non-electrified locations all around the country. So to give you some context to how to do that, it's a system built on data flow and very basic predictive algorithms. So we know very well what's going to sell in certain markets. Just, it's kind of a causation correlation comment. I don't actually care about causation. I only care about correlation because it's very predictive. So we can't store inventory in a location we don't truck any ice, which shocks people. We literally only truck cold fish and we sell them all within basically 36 hours. And the system, so it's a flow-based system. There's no storage capacity designed in it, which is a design. If you were to talk to a lot of cold chain experts, they'd say this will fail. I certainly heard that many times. And then I got it, the whole cold chain, I got priced out by European and African cold chain experts. And we've managed to build it for 15% of what they said it would cost. So we've changed the mindset from a storage and protection kind of risk averse mindset to I trust the data and I'm going to flow. And that's allowed us to basically have an extremely low cost way of pushing fish throughout the country.
You said two things there that seem inherently contradictory to me: non-electrified distribution centers and capture of data. How do you capture this data and how is it stored? And talk us through a little bit about the technology that you're using to decrease that perish rate.
Yeah. So on the non-electrified piece, I mean, the obvious piece is we can't afford to put generators and fuel storage on 40 locations. We've got 3 hubs and then 40 locations that go off a hub, and those 40 don't have power. So we've got very good data on fish temperatures through different cycles. So we know exactly what the fish temperatures will be in different scenarios. We know exactly what the associated shelf life is, and we have a red button you can press if you're a branch manager and you're getting close to it. So we've got kind of, and that's a very low cost red button for us. We just send out a motorcycle to go pick up whatever you've got extra, and then we always can reallocate it to another branch that didn't have quite enough. So you can manage like your error with, running a motorcycle costs less than $10 a day. So extremely low cost emergency valve. But then on the other side of it, then the data collection, Kenya is so we try to leverage our competitive advantages heavily. So 1 is sunshine, 2 is being right on the equator, 3 is having fish that have 1 million years of evolution here, so we can cut a lot of input costs, and of course have a healthier product. But then 3 is we have mobile data, or 4 or 5, whatever it is, but we have mobile data. So mobile's everywhere. And mobile money, Kenya's probably the global leader in mobile money. 1/3 of the economy trades on M-Pesa. So we have a completely cashless system. And so that gives us all of our customers information every time they buy from us. We have a portal developed with one of the local leaders in kind of mobile money. We've developed a custom portal for how like ladies, an interaction ability with the market ladies, which creates transparency, which without getting into the nitty gritty is essential to have a relationship with a customer as a corporate instead of just a salesperson, because then your salespeople work against you. So yeah, basically that ability to connect directly to the market lady, who's our customer. It's 95% of sales is to a highly distributed group of market ladies, like 10,000. So yeah, it's that level of kind of mobile money plus mobile communication capabilities is very powerful.
This concept of the market lady fascinated me. 95% of your distribution goes through them. By the way, as you've educated me, that's not a derogatory term. They are ladies. And it turns out if I'm in Nairobi, I don't go into the local Whole Foods and buy my tilapia. Describe how you connect with the market ladies and what that process is.
Yeah, it's maybe even worth going back one step. So a market lady pre-victory who wanted to trade fish, and fish is a cultural food. Tilapia's been here for a long, long time. So people want to eat tilapia. I didn't cover it before, but the wild catch is down 95%. So the traditionally available supply of fish is basically gone. And so people want to eat tilapia and it's not available. There would be a market lady in any urban or peri-urban environment who you would know is a reliable reseller of fish. Now, her quality would be terrible and her consistency of supply would be totally unpredictable because she doesn't have any cold chain connecting her to the lake. But that would be, if you craved a fish, the person you trust the most. Now, she would have to engage in multiple economic activities to survive because she doesn't know if she can source fish either today. And everything, she runs on a 24-hour cash cycle. So she's got to basically make a profit today to wake up tomorrow. So what we've been able to do for the market ladies is say, look, you have struggled to have reliable supply. That's solved. We've got fish every single day earmarked for you. Again, the predictive algorithm, basically we've got fish earmarked for her tomorrow, whether or not she's asked for it, because we know what probability is that she'll come in anyways. And so we've got that for you. Some market ladies have even gotten to the point where they're savvy enough that they cut their working capital by half by buying 2 times per day. We love that because it creates dependency. It allows them to grow. So the market lady now uses us not just as a supplier, but also as like their refrigerator. And it's just been a great pairing. We've started to integrate a little bit more with market ladies because that's, if we can increase their revenue by 10%, obviously it's our revenue. But the market lady channel, and to give you a little bit of a visual, an average market lady is selling 10 to 15 kilos or whatever, 20, 30 pounds of fish a day. That's basically how much fish you can fit on a tabletop. And so that's her world. And she operates usually in what we would call slum. We call them peri-urban markets because I find slums not to be very descriptive. And she basically operates literally on top of sewage, waste, filth, whatever you want to call it. If it rains, it's disgusting. So she can't have her product near that. So she's basically got to have a little tiny basin that she fries the fish in and then puts them on a tabletop. And she can't have fish waste. So we provide a fish that's prepared for frying. So it's been descaled, degutted, because she can't throw fish guts next to her because that would not attract customers. So yeah, so we have a very market lady centric viewpoint on it, and it's incredible. I mean, whatever. I think we just hit a record the other day of 40 tons of fish in one day. Selling it 12 kg at a time.
So you're not only creating fish, you've also created a lot of jobs, and that's one of the things that really inspired me about the story. Talk us through the labor market in Kenya, and how are you finding qualified laborers to staff the farm?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you have to really kind of put on a new set of thinking frameworks to think through this. But in the area where we operate, which is not all of Kenya, but where the farm is, which is rural Kenya, we've got probably north of 95% unemployment. We have at least 50% HIV positive rate. We're looking at majority of the folks who are under the abject poverty line. So it's a very challenging environment. Hunger is kind of an ever-present reality where we are. And so, the labor market is, if we put out an advert for a job, so the average pay is probably, according to a few NGOs, maybe $30 a month would be average. The minimum wage is 65, and the victory minimum is 120, and the victory average for labor is 170. So, we're paying 5x what folks would normally make, or 3 or 4x whatever minimum wage might work out to. So it's we get thousands of applicants every time we put up a job description. It lets us pick great people, and we do have really great people. But it's thinking about the labor market is a very, very different context. And for most of our employees, it's the first time they've ever had a formal sector job.
You bring in laborers that might otherwise be impoverished. You give them, a path to having food on their tables, and you're obviously helping their families. Talk us through the training process of maybe taking someone who hasn't had a job like this and making them successful through a combination of processes, technology. Like, what are some of the tools of the trade that require you to train these the Kenyan laborers?
Training is a great question. So we look at training as basically 80 or 90% of it's in the field, and a very small percent is formal training, and then some balance is coaching. And I think you cannot discount the importance of role modeling behavior. So for the first year we were running the company, maybe 2 years, we struggled to get people to show up on time, sober. I mean, this is an area with what I would say very, very widespread substance abuse. So getting someone to show up sober 5 days in a row, good luck. So that's where we use data and systems. So we set up biometric clock in, clock out, all sorts of penalty systems. That all took a year to work, but once it worked, it worked. And then we use some phone connected blowers to get people to sober up. But once we accomplished that, and people realized, hey, that guy over there who's been at the company for a year just turned his mud hut into a stone house with a metal roof. Suddenly our attrition rate dropped by 80%. Our drunkenness rate dropped almost to zero. I don't know if we've even had a drunkenness case this year. It's so the role modeling effect, when someone suddenly realized I can achieve what that guy over there achieved, which is middle income status. His kids are going to school. He's eating food every day. Lots of kids are in university from families where we're at, which is a huge, huge change from, of course, everyone having to work all the time in subsistence. So I think that I wouldn't discount that part of training was mindset development, and mindset development required role modeling. And that's really hard to get from 0 to 1 on. But once you've got it, it's actually very powerful and it replicates quite well. Then the next step of training is, okay, we got you at work sober and ready to work. How do we get you to be productive? And that's where more data and systems comes in, because now we have a very robust HR and payroll system that links directly to farm KPIs. And I have no doubt that that's one of the biggest reasons why we're successful. Yeah, we're probably in the right geography. We probably have an awesome, total addressable market is huge, but our ability to pay people for their direct contributions to the company and communicate that to them so that they understand it on a regular basis, daily basis, because the work is monotonous, that drives daily KPIs, which of course drives the whole company.
Now, our audience doesn't have the benefit of getting to see you face to face. I'm looking at you via video. We're going to publish this via audio, but I've seen you tell the Victory Farm story a few times, and I love that you light up when you talk about how you're changing lives. It truly is. It truly is an inspiration. So take us out 5 years, let's say, for Victory Farms. Where are the adjacent growth opportunities, and how do you build on the success you've had so far?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. We're looking at, this is kind of the realization I had a decade ago when I was doing my first time in fish. But we're looking at kind of one of the greatest imbalances in supply and demand that I've ever seen. But we're looking at, within East Africa alone, a 1 million ton deficit in fish. If you translate that into dollars, it's $2 or $3 billion of that's just the fish revenue. Obviously, there's other revenues in the industry. So, and who are the players in this space? Who's focused on it? And so, yeah, I think if you look at the next 5 years, we've got this this kind of star-studded team, whether it's got INSEAD Stanford types or ex-McKinsey folks, or really tough, grind it out farmer types who I love. We've got this really great balanced mixed team that just wants to get out there and deliver change. And we have a great equity program for people, so they're hungry and they drive hard. So I think if we look at like where we're going to be in the next 5 years, it's going to be expanding. I mean, if we can, for 5 years in a row, we've hit our production numbers, but if we can maintain that for 5 more years, we've got a chance to be one of the top fish farms in the world in our own backyard. Obviously, looking at license, if we're a technology leader on tilapia, which given our efficiency metrics, we probably are. Obviously, licensing technologies to other players or other geographies, the opportunities get very, very interesting when you've got efficiency levels like we have.
What's the single biggest thing that the Western world either doesn't understand or doesn't appreciate about the challenge of growing a business in Kenya?
I think that people don't understand the complexity of the challenges here, and that many investors, and I think the vast majority, look at problems from a single solution perspective. Like, if I could just have great fish production, I would, I know I can cut the cost by half because I can see that in other countries. That doesn't work in the African context because the challenges are so deeply embedded across so many different industries. So when we import goods, we're paying taxes that we shouldn't be paying. When we work with the local community, we're dealing with starvation on our back door. Of course there's a temptation to steal or just be angry. I mean, we've got 500 employees on the farm, but there's 5,000 people living in our valley. So 90% of the people still don't have a job. So how you deal with the interconnectedness of all of the challenges that exist, government failures, I mean, it's so complex. I mean, we could do quite a robust workshop on just what it takes to be successful. But what's come out of my thinking now from doing this for a decade and having quite a bit of success now in the fish chapter is you have to look at system-based solutions. Are you solving the ecosystem challenges that exist around the product or service that you want to deliver? If you don't understand the ecosystem failures that you're entering and you don't have a way to solve them, then good luck selling the single product or service that you think you can make a margin on, because it'll just fail.
Now, time's raced by, but about out of time. I got to get in one last question because this is something I want to hear from you, and I want everyone to hear from you. So a few years, whatever, maybe it's a decade plus in the future, a case study about the success of Victory Farms is being written. And as you're reading it, what's the thing that stands out that really defines or the accomplishment about which you're most proud when it comes to Victory Farms ultimately being very successful?
It's a great question. It's a bit of a soul searcher, but for me, it comes down to my core motivation for doing this, which is, food production today and animal production for human consumption is often unethical in animal welfare and totally unsustainable for the planet. And we are far too intelligent of a species to fall victim to this, I think. And there's far too much technology available for us to deploy to solve this. I think if, this is a what if scenario, but if Victory could be the first large scale fish farm in the world to be carbon negative, and every single fish that gets eaten, which I hope is 1 billion a day, actually makes the environment a better place, improves biodiversity of species in the lakes where it operates, it's it's not like a man on the moon, like a footprint on the moon, but like maybe it's like a footprint on the beach of Lake Victoria, that we can say that footprint was the first time we figured out how to make the planet better while making food. And if that can be what, if we can point to Victory Farms as the turning point where food production became a net positive instead of a net negative, I would all this very, very hard entrepreneurial sweat equity would be worth every moment.
I'm all for the patriotism of a footprint on the moon, but it sure didn't eradicate world hunger. And Victory Farms could put a dent in the universe in terms of that pandemic.
I hope so, Dan. Thanks.
Joe, any advice that you'd have for a younger version of Joe? What have you learned that you think you might do differently if you had to do over again?
Well, I think for people who are young and hungry entrepreneurs, my advice is it's great to get mentorship and training under people who are really smart and experienced, because a lot of the things that we're executing are not things that I divined in a whiteboarding session or woke up in a dream to. They're things that I heard really, career-long professionals in food opine about and dream about. And then I thought, let's work on that. And so I think accepting that some skill building era is part of entrepreneurship, experience building era is part of it. And then the very, very hard piece connecting it to is don't wait forever. It's great to be surrounded by excellent people who build you and challenge you for a while. But when you finally reach that point, and for me, it was the point where failure didn't matter at all to my ego. What mattered entirely was not trying. And when that lever flipped, it was then please fail. Like, I'm happy to fail, but I'm not happy to not try for another year of my life. So I think I really believe I've learned so much from the experienced professionals I had a chance to work with for the first decade of my career. Would never have been able to do it without that. But at the same time, I don't think you need to be in hold pattern forever. At some point, click go.
Brilliant. Well, Joe, I know I said that was my last question. I snuck in a last one after that, but just a fascinating discussion. I think it's notable that this conversation about fish farming and tilapia in Nairobi is probably one of the most fascinating technology discussions that we've had on this show. And I'm glad that we had a chance to share your story. I hope that everyone listening, shares my passion, my support for what Joe and the team are doing. Please, I encourage you to support Victory Farms, victoryfarmskenya.com. And again, Joe, thanks for taking time out of your evening. Really enjoyed the discussion.
A pleasure to be on, Dan. Take care.
And that's a wrap for this week on AI and the Future of Work. We are back next week with another fascinating guest. Your host, Dan Turchin, signing off. Have a great week.